Governance is about building community. Welcome to StrangersX, the podcast where I explore power, policy, and the people remaking the world from the margins. I'm Zainab Tangachira, and in this space, I hold conversations with thinkers, doers, dreamers across the global majority who are challenging old systems and reimagining new ones. In this episode of Strangers X, I'm joined by the director and founder of ethical seafood research, Wasseem Emam, to unpack the hidden power dynamics between local African fisherfolk, governments, and multinational seafood corporations. I ask, who really benefits from the ocean's treasures? Secondly, how do international sustainability standards like MSC labels or EU import bans can both help and harm African seafood economies? We also look at China's growing footprint across the continent's waters and how those relationships are being contested, reshaped, or resisted. This conversation is about more than just fish. It's about livelihoods, food security, sovereignty, and the struggle to define justice in a global seafood economy. Let's dive in. How do you define ethical in an industry that is often described and shaped by extractive global capitalism?
What they say they do and what the regulations say they should, but also their certifications. That's a big part of, let's say, ethical and responsible production. So those are the two things that one thinks of, but we believe that we need to go beyond that, right? So we believe that we need to think about how to minimize the harm that we do to animals, as well, of course, as people, but animals and ecosystems have to be given a lot more thought, uh, uh, in terms of, like you say, an extractive industry such as seafood. And this is particularly true in areas where we see fast industrial expansion. And
True.
that comes at a cost of traditional livelihoods and aquatic biodiversity. And just to your point about capitalist, in sorry, in a capitalist context, ethics means actively resisting exploitative norms. So, like, for example, we need to ensure that fish are stunned before slaughter. That's something we feel strongly about. We want to see workers' rights protected. We want to see communities have an agency over the resources that are exploited in the areas that they're based in. And we really need to see more environmental limits being respected. Yeah, so it's not just a label like ethical, it's really a commitment to fairness and to reducing harm in the industry.
hmm So really speaking to, the language of sustainability, you spoke to how, that thinking of ethical in the same lens as compliance, right? Looking in terms of how fishing companies approach their compliance processes and whether or not they have passed the compliance tests, right? In that space, there's always a language of sustainability, and I guess especially in a very international and global market, right? How then do international sustainability standards like MSC or EU import regulations help or hurt African seafood economies?
Yeah, it's a good one. I mean, they can definitely do both, right? So, on one hand, they do raise the bar on things like traceability, stock management, and welfare.
Yeah.
So as your audience knows, or listeners knows, we're keen on welfare. We'll know after this episode at least. But on the other hand, they can also act as gatekeepers, right? So they can exclude small scale producers, the ones who don't have the resources, for example, to get certification. So a certification and international sustainability standards like the ones you mentioned are not easy. It's a high bar to reach for many producers. So um, it's not accessible to everyone, let's say. Uh,
Yeah.
and those whose practices are sustainable but don't fit the Western template then get excluded as a result of that. So I think that's one of the um, issues I have with some of these standards. But also, well, I guess more to that, the fact that they often reflect priorities that are more in line with global north uh,
Mm,
communities, so it's not in line with local realities. So, uh, for example, sometimes there's a shortage of ice in many places, in many fish farming areas, which is no fault of the producers at all, but as a result, they can't slaughter the fish in the way that they are mandated to. So does that mean they then harvest at a later time when ice is available, but they lose out because the market's gone down? These are the kind of fluctuations you're getting in places where, the realities are very different to global north. Yeah. So
Yeah.
it can
Yeah.
end up reinforcing dependency rather than supporting sovereignty, or true
Yeah.
sustainability.
Mm.
Go ahead, Zainab.
Mm. So it's essentially a lack of co-creation, right, and or co-regulation, right? That it speaks to just really one context and one world, and not necessarily a pluralistic world, a diverse world. And you spoke of how a lot of these international standards can easily exclude small scale what did you call them? Um, but yeah, small scale fish farmers essentially, right? So, I assume then that's and as an extension of what the work that ESR does is that your work also does intersect with food security and livelihoods in African coastal communities. What have you seen in terms of in Egypt? How has that been, what have been the biggest hurdles, and perhaps, and maybe even more importantly, what have been the successes? Do you think if that exist in terms of that lies at the intersection of food security and livelihoods as well as ethical practices?
Yeah, I mean, our idea really, well, at least our work is grounded in the idea that if we want to improve fish welfare, we can't do it in a vacuum, right? So obviously that's our main goal, but we know that, fish are food in many places. Fish are also jobs and fish are culture. So if we want to improve fish welfare, we have to look at food security and livelihoods, especially in, like, as you say, African coastal communities. So we know that, or we believe that by helping farmers and fishers, the ones who are handling the fish, let's say, if we help them adopt higher welfare practices that are more sustainable, to use that word, which I tend to avoid using, excuse me, this is how we make the systems more resilient. So welfare can be part of improving food security and livelihoods if it's done right.
Mhm. Can
But
I ask why are you hesitant to use the word sustainability?
why I don't like to use it?
Yeah.
I mean, it's just come to have no meaning almost, that it's so overused. Well, the UN coined it, what, like 1982 or something? I think came out of the Rio Plus, no, May 1992. It was one of the Rio conferences, in the UN's Sustainable Development Conference, I think it was. And in the beginning, it had a meaning, and everyone kind of understood, okay, it means that, we can't just look at this capitalist model without putting any caps on it and thinking about whether extraction at all costs makes sense. Um, but now I feel like you just put the tag on anything without really thinking what it means. Okay, so there was a recent article by Joy. Do you know Joy Savoy from the charity entrepreneurship? Um,
Yes, I've heard of the name, but I don't know her personally.
Yeah, so Joey wrote a nice article about how sustainability, nothing is truly sustainable because it always means coming at the cost of something else, right? And that got me thinking. I'm like, yep, that's actually a nice way of looking at it, that
Mm.
nothing is truly ever sustainable. And that it's, there's like in greenwashing, all these different types of washing. So in our field, it's called humane washing, or welfare washing, but sustainability also is very, very often used for washing activities that are, you know, not sustainable.
Yeah.
Just the last thing I was going to add to your question, I was going to say that we also advocate for policy change that doesn't push small holders out of the market. So we're really keen to keep them in the conversation, and we look at innovations that look so things that can enhance both human and animal well-being. So ultimately, better fish welfare will should mean better food quality, safer working conditions, and more secure livelihoods. So that's basically our motto, let's say, which when we are entering these conversations with producers, we like to say. Sorry, but Zainab, you were going to say something.
No, no, no. No, that's great, right? I think I like the conversation, like where you've taken it, and just even sharing Joey Savoy's recent article, right? I was going to share really much some thoughts on that. Obviously, I haven't read the article, but I think while I appreciate the sentiment in the sense that I think it speaks to what you're sharing as well, that the term sustainability has lost its meaning, and but I think to say that nothing is ever sustainable is unproductive in my personal opinion, right? In the sense that because then what are we then working towards if trying to if achieving it is impossible, or even if it is it then worth trying to do? Or maybe I'm looking at it as well in a very black and white way. um Perhaps maybe it's really, I think it requires us to be more rigorous in how, we not just in terms of just intellectualizing these things, but also, practically engaging in these things. Like, does it, what are the barriers to translating the theory into practice? What prevents markets, capital from from also buying into this narrative? It's not enough for them to just say, "Oh, we hold sustainability values, and we do have a department in our organization or in our company." But does it also inform the company's business practice, the company's or organization's culture? You know, uh, and I know like these are conversations that constantly happen all the time, but I think the struggle is that there's we are failing at translating it into real tangible action. And I guess, that is a space that we need more people working in.
Mm.
Those private public partnerships.
Yeah.
Yeah, private public partnership and real partnership, not, savior, servient, partnerships where it's like, oh, I'm beholden, or, I'm so grateful to be in this space, but really true collaboration. And it doesn't have to come at the cost of capital, as is often, you know, put out there. But yeah, so that's it. Really, that was on my end that I wanted to ask you. Thank you so much for your time and just the work that you're doing. Really, really excited to see what more you get to do. And the next time I get to enjoy a good, delicious plate of tilapia, uh, I'll definitely before I even get to consuming, when I do get it from the market, ask myself, was this fish in a sustainable way? Asking questions, asking people in the market, people who are selling it, where do they get it? Um, how are they also contributing to the thing? Are they being supported? Are they aware of initiatives like this? And I think I urge even our viewers to do the same thing, to be a bit more conscious about the food that we eat, right? And especially when it comes to animal welfare, seafood also included, whether it's plant as well, just sustainability practice. We are what we eat out at the end of the day, as they say. So yeah, thank you
Absolutely.
so much, Waseem. I really appreciate the work that you do and your time.
No, I was just gonna say, and also in many cases, it may not, maybe the fish that you buy it might not be wild caught. So, keep an open mind to the fact that it might be coming from a farm, for example.
True. True. Mm,
So I
mm,
was just
mm.
gonna say that, and also just one tiny, tiny thing I want to say about the sustainability conversation was that I guess I also take issue with it because ethical is in our name and like we differentiate ourselves from the whole sustainability movement by taking it a little bit further and kind of focusing on some things are sustainable. Let's say, you could be farming okay, let's leave fish for a second, but you could be farming chickens at a very high density, feeding them a lot. You could be depriving them of all kinds of liberties. They'll grow well, you'll make good money. So that's sustainable economically. Probably environmentally, I mean, carbon footprint's probably lower actually because you're getting more out of that production. So I don't know if factory farms have to necessarily be, carbon intensive, but um it's just because it's sustainable and if it is sustainable, it's not still not ethical, because these chickens are growing so fast
True.
to meet that.
Market demands.
Exactly. And in the end they do develop all kinds of they become so heavy that they can't even support their own weight. That's pretty deep.
Yeah, 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 yeah. I mean, they don't have healthy, happy lives,
No, no, neither.
right?
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think that in and of itself, I mean, a chicken's life isn't just primarily to serve us, to arrive at our table. Even though that may be argued to be the food cycle, we're not here to tell you, well, strangers at the very least. I won't speak for you and your organization. Is that like I'm not here. We're not here to tell you not to eat meat, or also we're not advocating for that. But I think that what we're advocating for and what you're speaking to as well is to ensure that it is important that animals also live healthy, happy lives, right? That any kind of abuse should not be excused simply because we have this kind of control over them that we can farm them, etc. That is unethical. And I think we spoke about this earlier in the conversation about even just our normative values and social values, religious values that we have about life is that it is sacred, not just human life. And so, um, up to the point, including at the time in which it transitions, it gets to it becomes, you spoke of stunning, looking at more humane ways of ending their lives, is very important.
I was just gonna say to your listeners, viewers, one last thing that speaking of happy, healthy lives, many people don't know that farmed salmon, for example, many of them are deaf. They actually are because of their like inbred and so on. A lot of them have hearing issues
Yep.
and they have heart defects. Yeah, so that's something that people don't know. But if you Google it, you'll
Interesting.
sure.
Hmm.
Obviously, you know,
Is it the farming practices? What is it?
the breeding practice. So it's like the way they're genetically selected and just kind of
Oh, yes.
uh,
Interbreeding.
so
Okay.
that goes on.
Fascinating stuff. Yeah, yeah, yeah. I
Absolutely.
mean, you've left us with a lot of questions now about the food that we eat. I think these are really big questions, and I think things that we need to take pause and pay attention to. It's not this like hillbilly, tree hugging as people would often just excuse it away. But really, I think something to take pause and to pay attention uh, to ensure that practices like this do not continue to be normalized, and that, there's incentive by farmers, whether it's fish farmers or just, crop farming, general animal farming, um, follow due process. Yeah, yeah. Thank you.
Absolutely.
Fascinating.
Thank you
Well,
for hosting me. Go ahead.
thank
Yeah.
you. Thank you as well, Wasim. Really enjoyed the conversation. I learned, I'm sure I don't speak for myself. I learned so much. There's like tidbit information. And the whole time I'm just thinking, my goodness, there's so much to consider here. And really, I think I always thought that, the tagline, our tagline here, Strangers, is that governance is about building community. And I think this conversation just really speaks to that broader definition of community, right? Is that community not just in terms of the people that we know and love in terms of our immediate circles, but even in terms of just like the global community, collaboration, in terms of regulation, in terms of governance, compliance, as well as also just thinking about, wildlife, seafood, in terms of that, and ensuring that our health, that whole One Health model, it really everything speaks to that one thing, and so we cannot build healthy communities if the food that we're eating is unhealthy, and that there is perverse, unethical practices. So yeah, thank you very much.